I turned 17 the day my father told me I wasn't the son he wanted. The words didn't come during an argument, not in a fit of rage, not even behind closed doors. No, he said it calmly, across the dinner table, in front of my entire family. The candles were still burning on my birthday pie, apple, not cake, because that's what Grandma always made for me, and I was still smiling from the awkward "Happy Birthday" song when he leaned forward, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You're not the son I wanted, Kevin. But that's all right. Derek is everything I hoped for." Derek. My younger brother. The golden boy. The football star. The one who got a brand new Silverado that day while I got a second-hand hoodie and a handshake. Mom gasped. Grandma froze mid-slice. I said nothing. What could I say? I knew he'd always preferred Derek, but hearing it, verbal, sharp, final, cut deeper than I ever expected. In our Texas town, a boy like me was a mismatch. I didn't hunt, didn't throw perfect spirals, didn't shout "Bora" at the 4th of July parade. I sketched buildings. I read about engineering. I spent late nights designing bridges and scanning Google Earth for satellite images of cities I'd never been to. My dreams didn't fit in Beaumont. My father, Rick Sanders, a retired Marine with hands like bricks and a jaw clenched like a vice, saw no value in blueprints. He wanted grit. Sweat. Friday night lights. Derek gave him all of that. I gave him silence, ideas, and ambition he couldn't understand. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that a week earlier, I'd received an early acceptance letter from MIT. It was the most important envelope I'd ever held, and I kept it hidden under my mattress like contraband. I hadn't told them yet. I was waiting for the right moment, the right words, the right breath. Turns out, there's never a right time to tell a man like Rick that his quiet, artistic son was leaving Texas for Cambridge. That night, after the plates were cleared and the sting of his words still clung to my skin, I walked outside, sat on the hood of my rusting Civic and stared up at the stars. There weren't many, Beaumont's sky always seemed a little tired, but I found one, bright and steady, and whispered to it, "One day, I'll show him who I really am. I'll make him regret every word he just said." It wasn't rage that settled in my chest. Not yet. It was something slower, quieter, more dangerous. A seed. My dad didn't hit me. He didn't scream. He didn't need to. That one sentence was enough to bury every bit of approval I'd spent my life chasing. And still, I didn't rip up that MIT letter. I didn't burn my sketches. I didn't scream into the void. I went to my room, locked the door, and laid out every plan I'd drawn in the last 2 years. I imagined cities built by my hands. Towers that touched the clouds. My name etched into blueprints. Somewhere deep in my bones, I made a promise, not just to prove him wrong, but to outshine everything he thought Derek could ever be. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I just wanted to become so undeniable that forgetting me wouldn't be an option. But life doesn't care what you want. Because just 3 weeks later, I would be forced to give up that dream. And that, not his words, not that birthday, not that Silverado, that would be the moment that changed everything. 3 weeks after my birthday, the letter from MIT still lay under my mattress, unopened by anyone but me. Every night I pulled it out just to remind myself it was real, that someone out there believed in the version of me my own father couldn't see. I had plans. I was going to wait until school awards night to tell them all, make it public, unhide my truth in front of teachers, neighbors, and Derek himself. I imagined the way their faces would freeze when they heard the words, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. But I never got the chance. Not even close. The collapse started with one envelope, hand-delivered to my dad on a Thursday afternoon. It came from the Texas State Financial Aid Office, addressed jointly to Mr. and Mrs. Rick Sanders. I remember hearing his voice from the kitchen when he opened it, low, then rising, like a train picking up steam. I came down the stairs slowly, sensing a storm. When I walked in, he was standing in the middle of the room, that letter in his hand, looking at me like I'd just spit on the flag. "You applied to MIT?" he barked. Not asked. Accused. "You applied for aid without telling us?" My chest tightened. "I didn't want to ask you for money." "I didn't think you'd." He slammed the envelope down. "Damn right I wouldn't. What kind of man sneaks behind his family's back? What kind of son thinks he's too good for the life he's been given?" He didn't care about the scholarship or the school. What pissed him off was that I had taken a step on my own. A step he couldn't control. The next morning, he withdrew the documents. Just like that. Called the school and told them I'd made a mistake and would not be accepting. Told the financial aid office he was rescinding his parental consent. That was all it took. One call. One faxed signature. One moment of ego. And everything fell. When I found out, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I went to the garage, where he was changing the oil on Derek's truck, and stood behind him for a full minute before speaking. "Why would you do that?" I asked. He didn't even look up. "Because this family doesn't run away from hard work. You don't need MIT. You need to learn what it means to be a man." I left the garage with my fists clenched so hard my nails broke skin. I didn't eat dinner that night. I didn't talk to anyone. I stayed in my room, staring at the empty spot under my mattress where the letter used to be. It felt like someone had gutted me and left the shell. The next morning, my mom slid an envelope under my door. It was the original MIT letter, now creased, stained with oil. No note. No explanation. Just the proof of what could have been. That weekend, Derek got a full scholarship offer to play football at the University of Texas. The town celebrated like royalty had been crowned. My father held a barbecue in his honor, invited half of Beaumont, had custom banners printed, "Proud of our boy, future Longhorn." I wasn't invited to the table. I watched from my window as Derek toasted with Dr. Pepper and flexed in front of the Silverado. And something changed inside me. Not rage. Not envy. Something cleaner. Sharper. I didn't want what Derek had. I didn't want their praise or their money. I wanted a win they couldn't take from me. I wanted to beat my father at his own game. And to do that, I needed to think bigger. Deeper. Colder. Revenge wasn't a fire. It was steel. And I was going to forge it slowly. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Project Comeback. I didn't know exactly what I was building, but I knew this: whatever came next would be designed with the same precision I used in every blueprint. No explosions. No screaming matches. Just a plan. One that would take years to develop. One that would make sure when the fall came, it wouldn't be mine. I stopped trying to be part of the family after that. I didn't say it out loud, didn't pack a bag or slam a door. I just shifted. Quietly. Strategically. I spent my days like a ghost in my own house, showing up, eating just enough, nodding at the right moments, but mentally somewhere else. My body was in Beaumont, but my mind had already left. Project Comeback became my second skin. Every night after work and homework, I buried myself in it, researching online coding bootcamps, open-source architecture tools, and remote contract jobs. I sold old sketchbooks on Etsy, designed fake logos for fake businesses, and took on small online gigs for actual companies that didn't care I was a teenager. I wasn't just saving money. I was building skills. Quietly. Efficiently. I learned how to automate emails, write basic Python, analyze public data, spoof social media accounts. Every tool I added became part of a growing system, something I would eventually use to burn the very ground my father walked on. But I wasn't there yet. First, I needed out. A year later, graduation came and went. No caps, no tassels, no celebration. Derek's photo was in the town paper. Mine wasn't. While he left for Austin with his scholarship, I took a job at the local supply yard just to keep appearances. My dad thought he'd beaten me, thought I'd folded. But at night, I built the system. A network of aliases, sock accounts, and background setups. I worked under 3 different names. Kevin Sanders was just the decoy now. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient. And I'd learned one truth that changed everything: if I couldn't go to MIT, I'd make it so MIT came to me, through contracts, recognition, influence. Reputation wasn't built in lecture halls. It was built in results. And if I could become undeniable online, I could rewrite the story my father thought he'd authored. At 20, I was living in a small apartment in Houston under a rental agreement signed by one of my aliases. Nobody knew I was there, not even my mom. I sent her birthday cards from anonymous mailboxes, cash folded into blank paper. Derek had started getting cocky. He had a few good games, started posting his workouts and grind set speeches online. I watched every video. Studied the way he talked. I knew that sooner or later, the spotlight would move to him full-time. And that was part of my plan. Because if my father was proud of Derek for what he could do with a ball, I'd make sure he was destroyed by it too. But revenge isn't rushed. That's what makes it satisfying. It's not about the sting. It's about the collapse. And the deeper I buried my identity in digital layers, the more powerful I became. I built a platform for anonymous college mentorships, branded it as a nonprofit. It gained traction fast. Students, donors, even professors began sharing it. They never knew the founder's name. That was intentional. Meanwhile, under another alias, I started consulting for an architecture startup based out of Chicago. They thought I was a grad student from NYU. They paid me $6,000 a month to redesign digital blueprints. I funneled it all into savings, diversified across 3 online banks under 3 different SSNs I had bought through legal gray markets. I was playing a long game. And every time I transferred another $1,000 to my accounts, I imagined my dad still thinking I worked for minimum wage in a warehouse. The more I earned, the more invisible I became. I used burner phones, crypto transactions, encrypted email. My revenge wouldn't be a confrontation. It would be a revelation. One day, when everything was in place, would turn the spotlight on Derek, and watch everything my father built around him shatter. Not because Derek was evil. But because I was going to build a trap so elegant, so perfectly engineered, that they'd both walk into it smiling. And when it all collapsed, I'd be standing so far above them they wouldn't even know where to look. I didn't plan to target Derek first. Honestly, I thought I'd start with my father, slowly dismantle his pride, his name, his legacy. But when you're engineering something this big, you can't ignore an exposed foundation, and Derek had one the size of a stadium. He was already famous in our town and rising in Texas football circles, but what no one saw beneath the clean Instagram feed and sponsored supplements was the mess. He was cocky, sloppy, and reckless with women, especially freshmen. I knew this because I followed every single one of them under burner accounts, watched the patterns, tracked the DMs, the deleted posts, the subtle hints that something was off. Derek wasn't abusive. He was just entitled. Careless. And that's all I needed. Because when people like my father build heroes out of flawed sons, all you have to do is hold up a mirror at the right moment. So I created one more alias. Jenna. She was perfect. A journalism major from Oklahoma State, aspiring to break into investigative reporting, moved to Austin recently, still figuring out the city. I built her profile meticulously. Real photos. Believable history. Organic posts. I even had her follow obscure accounts to make her look like a real person who had real interests. It didn't take long for Derek to bite. He followed her back within a day. A week later, he was in her DMs. 2 weeks after that, he sent her things I knew he shouldn't. Nothing criminal. But enough to question his judgment. I archived every message, every selfie, every dumb joke he thought was flirty. Then I ghosted him. Blocked him everywhere. No drama. No closure. 3 weeks later, I published an anonymous Medium article titled Longhorns, Locker Rooms, and the Invisible Line Between Confidence and Arrogance. It wasn't about Derek directly. Not yet. But the quotes were real. The screenshots, redacted but suggestive, were real. The behavior matched enough players on the UT roster to cause whispers. I dropped the article link in 2 UT subreddits and tagged a few small-time college football gossip accounts. The story didn't explode. But it simmered. Long enough for people to speculate. And then Derek, brilliant as always, decided to post a vague tweet: "People always try to tear down those who shine brightest. Still grinding. Still rising. #haters gonna hate," and that, right there, was my opening. Because now I had motive. He confirmed guilt without realizing it. A week later, Jenna reappeared in the comments of that article under a fake Reddit account, saying, "He sent me those messages. I just didn't want to ruin a future over a stupid moment. But now I see he's not sorry. So yeah, I'm confirming it." That's when things started moving fast. Blogs picked it up. Sports sites ran quiet mentions. A podcast even brought it up as a case study in college athlete ego. Derek didn't lose his scholarship. But the Longhorns benched him to let the situation cool. And suddenly, the town's golden boy was sitting on the sidelines, and nobody was printing banners. My dad didn't speak about it. He just kept shaking his head at the TV when the news hit the college sports ticker. "Jealous losers, that's all," he muttered. But I knew better. I saw it in his eyes. Doubt. That was the first crack. A sliver in the armor. A whisper in the back of his mind saying, maybe he's not perfect. I wasn't done. Not even close. Derek would recover. But I wasn't going to let him. Because while the town still saw him as a misunderstood athlete, I was already laying the next part of the trap. I didn't need to destroy his reputation overnight. I just needed to make sure every comeback was harder than the last. And the best part? Nobody knew I existed. No fingerprints. No connections. No trail. I was just a ghost, shaping their lives from shadows. But the shadows wouldn't stay shadows forever. Soon, I'd step into the light, and when I did, the world they'd built on my broken dreams would fall like a house of cards. They say the best revenge is living well. I disagree. The best revenge is when the people who buried you end up digging their own graves while thinking they're building thrones. After Derek's scandal cooled off and the spotlight dimmed, my father worked harder than ever to repolish his image. He organized community cleanups, donated to the church in Derek's name, gave speeches about second chances like he was a wounded veteran of morality. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about Derek. This was about him, Rick Sanders. The hero dad. The proud Texan. The man who could raise boys into men. That was the image I needed to break. And for that, I had to make him speak. See, my father had always loved attention. He talked loud in restaurants, laughed too hard at church, and always made sure people saw him praying before meals. So I gave him an audience. I resurrected a local podcast that had gone dormant, Heart of Beaumont. I bought the rights under one of my shell companies and hired a voice actor to host it remotely. We made it look grassroots, rustic logo, acoustic guitar intro, all-American energy. It started with interviews of local folks, veterans, old coaches, some diner owners. Real boring stuff, but comforting. Once the podcast gained a bit of traction, I reached out to my father using a fake name, Lucas Hartman, producer. Said we wanted him on to talk about raising strong sons in a modern world. He agreed instantly. He showed up for the Zoom interview in a UT polo shirt, flags behind him, guns on the wall, the whole Texas dad aesthetic. And then he did what I knew he'd do. He talked. Too much. Bragged about tough love, about setting boys straight, about how Derek needed structure, and how, the other one, the quiet one, Kevin, he just didn't have the same grit. My jaw locked when I heard him say it. MIT or not, I raised a worker, not a winner. You can't teach that at some damn college. I clipped that quote. Saved it. Filed it under, Final Blow, Phase 3. But I wasn't ready to release anything yet. Not until Derek was fully back in the game. I needed them on top before I pulled the floor. So I waited. 4 months. Meanwhile, I doubled down on my influence operation. Using my nonprofit alias, I began contacting journalists about patterns of silence in college athletics. I sent anonymous tips with just enough breadcrumbs to stir curiosity. I even wrote fake whistleblower accounts from fake players backing up the idea that big programs hush up athlete misconduct to protect funding. I wanted the media's radar warmed up. I didn't need them to target Derek, just to be ready when someone did. By the time Derek scored his first touchdown back on the field, I had everything in place. The clips. The voice recordings. The metadata. Even his deleted tweets. I'd already lined up dummy accounts to leak them at once, Reddit, X, Instagram stories, and a fabricated email tip to a UT watchdog blog. But I wasn't going to fire it just yet. I had one more thing to do. I needed to go home. I hadn't been back to Beaumont in almost 2 years. But I drove there one Friday afternoon, parked a block from the house, and watched it from my car. Same brown roof. Same crooked mailbox. I waited until nightfall, then walked the neighborhood like I was just another guy out for air. Nobody noticed me. I slipped into the backyard and just stood there, staring at the garage light glowing under the door. Probably my dad changing the oil on some truck again, or polishing tools like he was preparing for war. That's when it hit me, they really thought they'd won. That I had vanished. That I'd accepted my place. And that's exactly why this was going to work. Because when people forget about you, they stop protecting themselves. I left that night without knocking. I didn't need to say a word. My voice would come later. Loud. Public. Devastating. Revenge isn't fire. It's architecture. You don't light the match until every wall is wired, every support beam loaded. You wait, you measure, you watch the rhythm of the target's breath. Then, detonation. The day came on a Tuesday. Derek was trending for the first time since his scandal. He'd just landed a small endorsement deal with a sports drink company, regional, but loud. My father posted a Facebook video the same night, sitting in his garage with an American flag behind him, saying how proud he was of his boy. I watched it twice, then 3 times. His voice hit like old sandpaper, dragging across wounds that had barely scabbed. Some boys are born with talent, he said. Others just complain when they don't get their way. I smiled. That was the final fuse. I was ready. At 7:04 a.m. the next morning, I activated the drop. Everything was automated, multiple timed posts from different IPs, VPNs cloaking each thread, metadata scrambled. The Reddit post was titled, "How UT Covered for Their Favorite Athlete While Ignoring a Pattern of Behavior." Inside, screenshots, emails, fake testimonials, realistic but constructed, and Derek's messages to Jenna. All clean. All legal. All damning. One X thread showed the podcast clip of my father's interview, isolated and captioned, "This is how parents justify burying their other sons." That one hit harder than I expected. It got 30,000 reposts in under 2 hours. Then the Real press came. First, the blogs. Then a student-run UT paper. Then a mid-level sports journalist from Dallas who added fire by digging through Derek's Instagram history and noticing a pattern of sketchy DMs. One girl reposted the story saying, "He used to text me weird stuff too, but I thought it was just me." That was all it took. The narrative shifted fast, from promising athlete misunderstood to serial boundary pusher protected by silence. UT didn't make a statement immediately, but they pulled Derek from team promos. The drink company dropped him the same day. My father? Oh, he went ballistic on Facebook. Long posts. Angry caps lock. Bible quotes next to rants about cancel culture. The town didn't eat it up this time. Not like before. They'd seen the receipts. And even if they liked Rick Sanders, nobody wanted to defend a son who looked guilty on screen. Then came the real punch. I leaked the podcast raw files. Not just the quote. The whole thing. Every minute of him talking down about me, about how he beat weakness out of his boys. A sports blog titled their post, "Toxic Fatherhood and the Collapse of the Sanders Legacy." I didn't write that headline. But I couldn't have scripted it better. By Friday, Derek was officially suspended from the team pending conduct review. Not criminal. Not permanent. But enough. His face disappeared from every UT page. My father deactivated his socials. The man who'd once worn his sons like medals now looked like a bitter fraud. And me? I was invisible. No one knew the name behind the curtain. Just whispers. An online storm with no eye to find. I watched it all from a coffee shop in Chicago, earbuds in, pretending to work while my laptop streamed chaos. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stared. This wasn't joy. This was justice. Controlled. Calculated. Clean. They took my name from the walls of our house. I took their name from the map of their town. After the blast, I expected silence. But not the kind I got. This wasn't just quiet, it was absence. My father disappeared from public view like a man who'd been told his house was built on bones. Derek's name trailed off the news cycle within days, but not in the way winners fade. It was the kind of disappearance reserved for damaged goods, too risky to touch, too familiar to forget. The school gave no clear answer. Pending investigation. But in small towns like Beaumont, unanswered questions rot reputations faster than lies. People don't need proof. They need a reason to look away. I watched my father try to scrub the internet of his past glory. Deleted videos. Removed tags. Even tried to take down the podcast, not realizing I had full control of the host account. The interview lived on every mirror site I'd pre-uploaded. It was never going away. And then came the emails. Not to me, never to me. To journalists. To radio hosts. Pleading, bargaining, occasionally threatening. Saying the quotes were doctored, that the whole thing was AI generated. The desperation was almost theatrical. But it told me something vital. The man who once mocked my silence was now begging to be heard. I didn't respond. Why would I? I was no longer Kevin Sanders, the quiet one. I was the ghost of everything they tried to erase. I'd already started writing my new name long before the plan launched. New ID, new address, a consulting firm registered under a corporate shell in Illinois. Kevin didn't exist there. What existed was K.L. Sutter, independent data security analyst, specialized in digital footprint control. And that was the final irony. The kid my father called soft, too techy, too sensitive, was now selling protection from the very thing that destroyed him. Meanwhile, I had one last thing to clean up. Not revenge. Not fire. Just precision. I'd let Derek drift too long in the storm without pressure. I needed him to crack. Not collapse, just bend far enough for people to see the fracture lines up close. So I sent a package. No return address. No name. Inside, a printed copy of every message he ever sent, Jenna, highlighted in yellow. A flash drive with audio clips of his dad's podcast. And a single sticky note that said, "You were never the target." Just the lesson. I don't know what he did after that. But 2 days later, he posted a long, cryptic note on X: "Not everyone who looks quiet stays quiet. Some of them build bombs in the dark." It got picked up by a few college drama accounts. Most people just laughed. But some, they paused. Because deep down, they knew this wasn't some wild scandal. It was a system cracking under its own weight. And I was the one with the blueprint. Funny thing is, I never felt like I won. Revenge isn't victory. It's closure in reverse. You don't rise, you just stop sinking. But in that stillness, that flat calm after everything falls, you can finally breathe without apology. I never expected to be known. But I made sure they'd remember what they forgot. I was there. I saw. I bled. And I built. Quietly. Perfectly. There's something satisfying about the quiet moment before the storm hits its peak. I'd waited for months, letting the media weave the story of their downfall. Every whisper, every post, every shaky interview, I had engineered all of it. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I needed the one thing I'd been working toward since the start, the one moment when everything they'd built, every lie, every manipulation, every false image, crashed down, all at once. I knew exactly when the pieces would fall into place. The final bomb was ready to drop. I'd kept the real evidence buried, like an ace I didn't need until the final hand. I'd built this whole thing methodically. Each movement, each thread I pulled had a reason. I had given Derek a chance to redeem himself, to prove he could be better. I had let my father think he could go back to the surface, like the past wasn't haunting him. They thought they were free. But what they didn't realize was that the truth was never going away. And I had a truth they couldn't shake. It all started with a single email. It went to the board of trustees, to key alumni, to donors, the people who held the strings. The subject line was simple: a family's secret. The body of the email was a slow unraveling of Rick Sanders' past, a past they didn't want to face. A series of documents, photos, and audio clips. Uncensored. Uncut. The truth about his earlier years, long before Derek, before any of it. His so-called tough love philosophy didn't start with his children. It started with his first wife, who mysteriously vanished from the family records. I sent it without remorse. Without hesitation. I had known for years. The story behind the man who prided himself on being a model father was far darker than anyone ever imagined. Rick's ex-wife wasn't just a forgotten name, she was a casualty. A woman he had driven to the edge. And he had used the same manipulation tactics on her, that same control and intimidation, long before he ever had kids. The reason Derek had been so easily swept into his web? Because that's how Rick operated. It wasn't love. It was possession. I made sure to highlight the photos, ones that showed Rick's early years, pre-Derek, pre-Beaumont. The photos of his ex-wife's bruises. I attached the old police reports from when she had tried to escape him, back when he'd used his charm to silence the cops and manipulate the system. It wasn't just about the children. It was about the toxic cycle that had been running in the Sanders family for generations. That was the final revelation. It wasn't just a dad ruining a son's future, it was the legacy of control, abuse, and dominance. The email hit hard. Within hours, the Board of Trustees called an emergency meeting. Alumni who had been proudly associated with Rick Sanders began to distance themselves. One by one, they started pulling funding from the university, citing moral failures in their dealings with the Sanders name. The sports program was thrown into complete disarray. It wasn't just Derek being suspended anymore, it was the entire legacy. The university couldn't afford to defend Rick anymore. The lie had collapsed. The town? The town went into panic mode. It was like someone had pulled a rug from under their feet. Rick Sanders wasn't the hero they thought he was. He wasn't the proud father, the hard-working man. They had been living a lie. The whole town started to turn. What had once been admiration became shame. I had crafted every part of this, and now the fallout was all around them. And then came the final blow. My father, Rick Sanders, went silent. Completely. His phone was disconnected. His social media wiped clean. He didn't even return calls from his closest friends. The man who had always been so proud to wear his identity as a local hero was now a ghost. His house was abandoned within weeks. It was as though he had vanished into thin air, a victim of his own actions. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel bad about it. Derek? Derek's silence was deafening. I had seen the cracks before, but now, they were impossible to ignore. The boy who had once lived in the shadow of his father's success was now just another face in the crowd, forgotten in the wake of scandal. He had no choice but to face the truth of his family's legacy. For me, I watched it all with a kind of calm detachment. Because I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed them. I had revealed their lies. And now, I was free. There was no satisfaction in it, just a sense of completion. I had orchestrated the greatest lesson they would ever learn. And it was a lesson they would never forget.